We are being live streamed. Admit Lynette. And finally, record to the cloud. We are being live streamed. Admit Lynette. And okay, gotta get rid of this echo. All right. Okay. Sam Dickson, I'd like you to meet Lloyd M. Kelly, Lloyd Kelly, Sam Dickson. And this is both of y'all's second appearance on my podcast. So welcome again. Lloyd was here last week. Sam was here last night. Sean has been here like for the past 5 years. And Lynette seems to be having trouble connecting, but you've already met Lynette. She was here last week with you.
Hey, Lynette, how are you?
Sam was saying some incredibly interesting things last night that I want to follow up on a little bit. And I think that they're very relevant to things that you've said too. Last week when you were here, you were commenting about how the Haitians were justified in what you might call a racial exclusion policy of whites. And Sam last night strangely echoed you by saying that he thinks that the racial policies of early revolutionary Haiti made sense also. And so I thought that was a really interesting place. Sam also said, and this sort of shocked me and took me aback, that we should not be looking to January of 1933 in Germany. For an inspiration, we should be looking to October of 1917 in Russia for our inspiration. And so having mentioned those things, hi, Lynette. Lynette, I'd like you to meet Sam Dickson, Lynette, and you already know Lloyd and Sean, I believe.
Nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you too, Mr. Dickson.
And so let's start with those things. And I mean, the other thing that came up last night was, okay, I can see we're going to have trouble getting everybody on the same board. The other thing that came up last night that bothered me, just so that Lloyd will know. Oops. Okay, Sam Dixon's back here.
Can you at least text while you're on there?
Charles, what I think happened is he just muted his camera.
Oh, okay.
And what I think is going on is your screen is set to, when somebody mutes their camera, their picture disappears off the screen probably. And when they turn their camera back on, it comes back on. That's probably what's going on.
Totally beyond my technical ability.
All right, I'm back. Okay, sorry about that. My fault.
You were basically advocating an endorsement of Bolshevik revolution as a template, and then I just want to comment in the past 5 or 6 months since I started doing podcasts again. I've had an incredible variety of people on here, and you and Bill last night seemed to be saying something about class that was a little bit contradictory. You seem to be saying that the upper class should be decapitated, basically, in a Bolshevik revolution, because the upper class has become stupid. Whereas Bill, I think, was saying that we should only give tax breaks to people in a high economic bracket to encourage them to have children. And that got me really confused because, of course, a lot of different issues there. But one of Bill's points on previous podcasts has been to quote John Vorster, and I believe Paul with this also, that whites need to learn how to cook their own food and maintain their own lawn and tend their own gardens.
I would add one other thing to that, raise their own children.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm being facetious. Go ahead. Sorry.
I started off life in London, England, with an Indian nanny, and then I came to Dallas and had like three black maids taking care of me, and so your point is valid, and so I'm going to shut up now and ask Sam and Lloyd to discuss those issues, starting with those points.
Well, I first want to separate myself from the Bolsheviks. I don't like the Bolsheviks. Had I been alive in 1917, I would have contrived a way to assassinate Vladimir Lenin. And my sympathies are entirely with the whites and the white Russians in the Civil War. When I say we looked at 1917, what I mean by that is several things. One is there is no possibility of reform in the present system. We cannot do an electoral reform. We can only hope for a termination of this system and an opportunity to create another system, which is the opportunity that the Bolsheviks had in 1917. And we would not be under the burden then of legality. When you succeed legally to a government, you're handicapped by that. You're frozen in their methods and their way of doing things. And the existing way of doing things has been our destruction. So we have to find a very new type of state, not only a new ethno state, but we have to have new rules governing the ethno state. As I've said many times, we have to think post-America. And so that's really what I meant. As for class, I didn't really call for the massacre of the upper 1%, but I do observe that in America, the ruling classes, the whites who have risen to high positions, are generally classified, they're generally characteristically sociopathic. Because in America, any degree of loyalty for a white person, anything is negatively correlated to success. Even loyalty to one's own family is negatively correlated to success. And loyalty to one's race and region is absolutely the third rail. It's instant death. So the problem we have in America is that the white element of the ruling classes is the most disloyal to ourselves, and the leadership of the Blacks and the Jews and the Hispanics and rival races, in their cases, the greater the degree of racial loyalty and ethnic loyalty, the greater the chance of success. So their element of the ruling class are even more dedicated to their community than the average Black person or Jew or Hispanic. Ours are the least loyal.
Am I supposed to respond to that? Is that what we're doing, Charles? Because that's a lot to unpack. That's a lot to unpack. First, let me say this. I really want to get an understanding of Mr. Dickson's position, because I didn't have context for the conversation from last night. But I'm going to go forward assuming that Mr. Dickson is a nationalist or a supremacist. Which one, Mr. Dickson?
I have my own term. I call myself a racial idealist and also a racial communitarian. I don't think a genuine feeling of community is possible in a non-homogeneous community.
Okay, so you would like an ethno state. Is that correct? 2 of them, I would imagine, or 3, or how many of them? Is that
my position, as I've said before, when I come under attack by normies, is that if Jews have a right to their ethno state in the Middle East, which could only be created by brutal ethnic cleansing, as we have seen in history, then we have an equal moral right to an ethno state of our own. Just as Haitian Blacks, I think, anticipating from what I've heard from Carlos Augustus, our host, you feel that Haitian Blacks had a right to create a homogeneous Haitian nation.
Okay, let's do this also. Let's get my position let me clarify my position for you. What I said last week when I was speaking with Mr. What is it, Williams? Was it Mr. Williams? Is that when you hold me in slavery and brutalize me and torture me and rape my women, then I have a right to do whatever is necessary to stop that. So I don't think that it is, I'm sorry, communitarians that want to that talk about brutalizing and fighting and all of this. And I find it very interesting because I think that they're just arrogant people. What in the world would make you think that I'd want to live next to you? I don't want to live next to you, but what I do want is when we create our neighborhoods and we're thriving, what I do want is for you to leave us alone. See, I don't want, let's see, oh, we saw this Black guy looking at this white woman, let's go burn down their town. And that's what you tend to do. Our people historically who think like you tend to do. So my position is that, fine, I believe that tall fences make great neighbors. I can live next door, you never come to your house. It's great, I'm fine with that. So we need and I need you to be separate and homogeneous and all these other things. That's in your head, sir. That is your paranoia. We're not there.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, for one thing, I have to correct you. I don't want to, it doesn't apply to where we go from here, which is what I think we're talking about, but nobody has ever enslaved you. Nobody in your race has been enslaved since 1865, some 7 generations ago.
Excuse me, stop. We're not going to play that game, Mr. Dickson. We are not going to play that game. So slavery is alive and well today. Read the 14th Amendment. So when 1/3 of Black men go to prison between 17 and 35, and the Constitution says that no one shall be held in servitude or are enslaved or in servitude except for those people that are imprisoned, we're talking slavery is alive and well today.
Can I chime in on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, because I've got 2 horsemen or criminal convictions for sending emails to the government complaining about the government not honoring my veterans preference, and the convictions were just trumped up charges to come up with an excuse for not having honored my veterans preference in the past, as if to say, okay, now I got you on something, so I got you on something for saying something today, and therefore I'm justified in never having honored your veterans preference 10 years prior, And then I looked at what happened in the summer of 2020, and there were many Black people throughout the country who were rioting, who were throwing Molotov cocktails, who were saying all sorts of things, and none of those people got arrested for what they did, much less what they said. So I don't agree with you that the Blacks are really picked on in the courts. My experience is that if a Black person said things that I was accused of saying, they wouldn't even get a criminal charge. In fact, I think most white people won't get a criminal charge either. I think somebody just didn't like me. But, I look at that summer of 2020, the supposed racial injustice summer, and you look at all that violence and people, they weren't arrested for that. I don't see how that violence and being able to get away with it without being hit with criminal charges in any way reflects a system of injustice that is persecuting the Black man. If anything, they got away with incredible acts of violence that if a white man engaged in would land him in prison probably for the rest of his life, throw him off.
Sean, can I just interrupt for a second?
Yeah,
I want to ask one question. So in the summer of 2020, the summer of racial justice, how many police officers were died? And everything that was going on around the world, how many police officers died versus how many police officers died January 6, 2020? And show me a Black face in that crowd besides the police officer that was putting his life at risk to save our government.
So because no police officers were killed during those riots, the riots are okay?
First of all, we could talk about the riots. So there are many people believe that those riots were actually started by white people, Proud Boys and the other one group that came in, made themselves look like black people, started the thing and created a riot. So we're not, because most times our rallies are peaceful. And the other thing is, we had a reason. Did you watch that tape of George Floyd? Did you watch that tape? Did you see?
You do not have a reason. You do not have a reason. No, you do not.
We do not.
I watched most of the trial with George Floyd, and that's a perfect example.
Did you watch the tape? Did you see? Okay. Did you watch?
Yes. I saw all that. I watched the tape.
6 white men jumping on this man, choking him to death for selling cigarettes.
Okay.
And are you really going to sit here and try and justify that in any way, shape, or form?
No, I want to respond to this, Charles. I'm glad you went there. Okay. I just had a trial where I put 11 police officers on trial for pointing guns at me after I had called 911 and surrendered. No justification whatsoever for doing a raid. You know, they came to get me. This is horse manure, but you know what? Hello, this is me. Tell everybody calm down. I'll go into custody and deal with this through the courts, right? And there's nothing that makes a police officer more angry than somebody who says, yes, officer, what are my instructions? You do that, they get more angry than they would if you fought them. And this is a problem with police. There's a power thing, this feeling of power, and it's systemic throughout a lot of law enforcement officers. And I think we probably get the wrong people to be law enforcement officers. I think it's attracting people who are bullies, whether they're white or black. I think
we agree 100%.
Okay, there's a sense of being a bully,
sociopaths
that are attracted to being cops. Now, I had to try the case myself because I couldn't afford an attorney, right? But if I was black or Hispanic, ACLU would have come in and tried the case for me, right? But because I'm a white guy, they wouldn't even look at it. They wouldn't
this victimization of white people just cracks me up. So you do know that you're able to carry a swastika, or you're able to go into Jewish neighborhoods or black neighborhoods carrying Confederate flags or swastikas or whatever because of the ACLU. You know that.
But I don't
right?
do that though. That doesn't help me at all.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Dickson. If that were to happen, would you want those people to be prosecuted?
You are factually and legally wrong.
No, I'm not. No, I'm really not.
White officers were killed. 5 were killed by a Black Lives Matter activist at a Black Lives Matter.
Excuse me, what 5? 5 what?
White cops were killed, and their names aren't even known because white lives do not matter.
Because there were no 5 police officers killed, and we're not going to create. We're not going to rewrite history. We're not going to rewrite history.
6 whites were killed by a black man in Waukesha, Minnesota. Waukesha, Minnesota. Are you going to deny that a black man rode his car, a black man whose social media is hatred of white people?
Okay, are you going to deny that a white man went to Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay Hotel, took a high-powered assault rifle, and killed 50 people? Are you going to deny that? I don't get your point, sir.
I think you're just living in a world in which you make up your own facts.
Oh, so Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas a few years back didn't happen?
You will not address the fact that a black, white-hating activist killed 6 whites in Waukesha.
No, Mr. Dickson.
More.
What I'm doing is I'm not going to discount 48,499,000 for one. I'm not going to do that.
You're just living in your own counter universe.
No, I think you're living in yours. And I got on this conversation because, and I think we're getting a little out of hand. I got on this conversation because I want to find the consensus between us. Because quite frankly, all I want the United States government to do is pay reparations to descendants of American freedmen, and you people can go wherever you want to. Leave us alone. We'll be
Can I
happy.
ask, Charles, I have another question on that too. I'm half Irish, okay? And the Irish, if you trace the Irish back, our first people came over here were indentured servants, and they were able to work out of it. And of course, most Black people were not indentured servants; they were not able to work out of it.
Correct.
So, am I entitled to any type of reparation? Because why?
Because your ancestors made a choice. They knew what they had to sign a document saying that I will do this for 7 years or whatever the terms of that contract were. Mine didn't have a contract.
Okay,
Mine were brought here against their will.
Today,
Forced into labor.
I'm just going to interject here. Sam and I last night were talking about how today is the anniversary of the martyrdom of King Charles I.
The execution of Charles I.
Huh?
The execution of Charles I.
In my church, we call him a martyr. Anyhow, the martyrdom of King Charles I. In the years that followed his death, Cromwell did not give the Irish any meaningful choice about dying or being deported. They may have had officially the status of indentured servants, but their choice was basically leave or die. And Oliver Cromwell was every bit as much a slave trader as anybody who ever went to the west coast of Africa.
So I'll say that I'll answer it this way. If that seems to be, I've never heard that story, but then I'm not the most learned person in the world. I will say this, I will help Irish people get whatever they're due. I'll help Hispanic people. I'll help anybody. But right now, I'm concerned about reparations for descendants of American freedmen, because when you get through whatever story you can bring, it's not going to come close to the horrors that were put upon my ancestors, and even that I have to live with today.
Sam, I'd like you to finish some of your thoughts because I think you haven't quite gotten them all in.
I'm sorry?
In all due respect, Mr. Kelly has been fed a pack of lies that he chooses to believe because they're attractive to him. The mind believes what the heart wants to believe. Zora Neale Hurston, who he probably knows, is the first prominent Black female novelist in America, described slavery as her people's school for civilization. That was her opinion in the 1940s.
I'm sure you took that out of context.
No, just hear me out. You've had a long time to talk. That's what Zora Neale Hurston said. I think it's very déclassé to blame your parents for your problems after you're 21 years old. And to hear people talking about how they can't balance their checkbook, they can't buy a house, they can't have the same amount of net worth as an average white family because their great grandparents were in slavery. It's just you can't even just go there. It's just ridiculous.
So I'm assuming, Mr. Dickson, that there was no inheritance in your life. You didn't inherit from your parents, who inherited from their grandparents. But remember, there was something to inherit because you could own property. There was a time in this country where my family couldn't.
That's right. 7 generations ago. So quit crying about it. Get on with your life. Get on with your life.
Oh, so I tell you, I'm fine. I am getting on with my life. And part of getting on with my life, this is the funny part to me, is you're trying to tell me what I should do, but that's kind of like a rapist telling the victim how they should heal.
No,
reparations works for me, and my people were raped.
You're telling us that
Look at the color of my skin, sir.
You have a right to reach into the wallets of people whose ancestors weren't even here in 1865.
You know, Mr. Dickson, you don't listen. I talk a lot, but you don't listen. I have never said that I want anything from white people. My argument is not with you, sir. My argument is with the United States government.
And that's
my argument. The United States government was codified the laws that enslaved my ancestors. Therefore, my fight was with them.
I just want a separate state, and you can live in your state, and you can make up your own history. You can hate white people all you want. We can be rid of.
I don't hate white people, sir. But first, let's get another thing straight. And I love that you brought that up. Let's get something straight. So I love that you brought that up because you want to label me as Black, but I'm sure you can see me. So I don't look in any way, shape, or form or African. I don't have a lot of African features, and the color of my skin would certainly imply that there's a lot of cream in my coffee. So I'm not Black, I'm not white, I'm not Native American. I'm all three of those things. So you don't get to tell me about who I hate because I don't hate myself, sir. And that's what you're asking me to do.
Well,
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How would the reparations work, given what you just said? I mean, so would you get 1/3 of the reparation if it went through because you're 1/3 Black, or how would that work?
No, because legally we were enslaved. We were 100% enslaved. So the way that it would work is that it would only apply to those people that are actually descendants of American freedmen. But then you have to define, how do you define that? So my thought is that it would apply to any person, Black person who could show lineage in this country prior to January 1, 1940.
Okay, now does that become a patents of nobility? Could that be
I don't
interpreted?
even know what that is, sir. I'm sorry. Call me.
Could that,
Call,
well,
is,
given that it would become an entitled right, because I'm assuming then if it was your let's say it got passed in like the next 2 Congresses or something and got signed into law in our lifetime. So then do your children also get that? And then
not
your
if they're not
grandchildren?
born.
I know,
So
but
it
is
would
it a
only
one-time
apply
payment?
to people that are living today, that are living at the time the law was passed and payments started to go out. Anyone born after that would not qualify.
Okay, all right.
Because
So,
it is reparations. It's back pay for 400 years of unpaid labor and oppression.
Mr. Kelly, I think we paid quite a lot of reparations. We've had food stamps. We've had Section 8 housing. We've had
mainly, first of all, there are more white people get food stamps and Section 8 housing than Black people ever got. So don't go there with me, Mr. Dickson.
Your numbers game, you're paying it. There are 8 times as many white people in America. So to say that.
Okay, so then it wasn't reparations if white people were getting it, because they certainly are not entitled to reparations.
This money has been poured into your community. Head Start.
Really, no, what was poured into my community were highways called urban renewal. That's what was poured into our neighborhoods.
Stop talking over each other. Lloyd, let Sam talk. Don't, when one person's talking, the other person shouldn't talk. That's the only way we can have a meaningful discussion here, is if you let the other guy. Sam, you have the floor. Finish your thoughts.
There are so many things one could address. Let's think of my big inheritance. My parents were destitute. My parents came out of families that lost everything in the Depression. I did get inheritance them. They had to work very hard and be very thrifty to recover from that. We have devoted huge amounts of money to Black people. It's a mathematical trick to say there are more white people on welfare. This is a cheap statistical trick. There are 7 or 8 times as many white people in America as there are Black people. The thing is the percentages. The Great Society program, that wasn't even new. There already were massive welfare, wealth transfers going on to the Black community. You had, Lyndon Johnson created Head Start, Jobs Corps, food stamps, Section 8. Richard Nixon created reverse discrimination, quota hiring. We have so many things that for generations have transferred money from white people to Black people, and he's unwilling to give us any credit against his what he's allegedly owed for reparations for all the money that has been poured into his community. And he's right, it hasn't done any good. The rate of Black home ownership in America today is lower than it was when the Fair Housing Act was passed. There has never been a study that showed that desegregation, the end of so-called Jim Crow, ever brought about any improvement in Black academic performance. These are just hard statistics. If he thinks there are such cases, such studies, he should come on, we'll give him time. He can go find them. No one's ever told us about them. The New York Times has never told us about them. Anderson Cooper has never told us about them. 60 Minutes never told us about them, because there's no statistical basis to support the idea that these programs have ever brought about any change for Black people. I don't hate Black people. I wish them well, but I'm not willing to be blamed for things for which I have no responsibility.
Do I get to say something now, Charles?
Yes.
Okay, because that's a lot to unpack. So first, reparations, let's be clear on what it is. Reparations is payment, not a gift, not a program. It is payment for 400 years of unpaid labor and oppression. So welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, Section 8, pick any of the programs that white people are able to access is not reparations. What that is a program for people living in poverty. Big difference. So when you pay, people that work in America are supposed to be paid. 400 years, we were not paid. We are owed that money. And second, I really have to take umbrage with Mr. Dickson telling me how I think or feel about anything or what I've said. Mr. Dickson's very good at twisting words. Since he doesn't know, let me bring his attention to some of the, first of all, there's no study because Black people don't control the resources that it would cost to do the studies. But anecdotally, let's talk about Marva Collins and what she was able to prove. Let's talk about NOI, Nation of Islam, when they went into Washington, D.C. public housing, and were able to cut the crime down to nothing. And then the government said it was illegal for them to be there because they weren't part of law enforcement. Let's talk about those kinds of things. So I'm glad that your family was able to recover, but I'm sure on your application to whatever school you went to was not summarily rejected because of the color of your skin. Nobody's ever asked you or ask you to leave a restaurant because of the color of your skin, sir.
Neither were you. You've never had that happen to you. Your parents.
Oh, sir, don't let this beautiful face fool you. I have had that happen to me.
I don't believe that for 1 minute.
Well, you don't have, you know what you believe really means absolutely nothing to me. There's no reason to lie. When was the last time you saw someone in Mississippi put a double-barrel shotgun in your mother's face?
What restaurant asked?
When's the last time that happened to you, sir?
What restaurant asked?
You're gonna tell me my experience? Who are you?
What restaurant asked you to leave? You have a civil rights case. Give us the name, and then they can sue you for defamation because nobody ever asked you to leave a restaurant. This is just, and you also have not worked for 400 years without pay. That stopped in 1865. You never worked a day without pay.
Really? So, okay.
Really, undeniably so.
So, Mr. Dickson, let's talk about Jim Crow laws. Let's talk about Jim Crow laws where if I was walking down the street in Mississippi, and I didn't have a job, I was sent to prison for 5 years. Let's talk about that. That is true. Charles, I really want to get someplace with this, but this man is delusional. He really is. Either he's delusional or he is just an out and out liar.
You mentioned Marva Collins. Her school was exposed as a fraud. She rigged the test. Her school never accomplished anything.
No, that's what white people, she didn't have to rig those tests, sir.
The Nation of Islam has accomplished things. I like the Nation of Islam. I admire the Nation of Islam.
I'm sure they're thrilled to hear that.
I don't care whether they're thrilled or not. If I were a Black man, I would respect them because they seek to improve their own community and not to sponge off white people and to fabricate the kind of things that
no one has ever sponged off of you. If anything, you have sponged off of us. It's just listening to you talk about everything that you've been through. and how you worked hard. But let me see, were you denied access to capital simply because of the color of your skin?
Yes.
Oh, at what bank, sir? What bank? Let me see the application.
I can give you an example of somebody here in Atlanta whose name was Stephen Ogletree. He was a black man. He got 11 loans in succession from banks from 1989 until he died a few years ago. And he was foreclosed on every single loan. And the reason he got those loans, despite that record, was the color of his skin. And I would never be able to get a loan if I had 10 foreclosures.
And Fuhrer Donald filed bankruptcy 4 times. What's your point?
But the point is,
Fuhrer Donald filed bankruptcy 4 times. What's your point?
I need to explain to you what the point is. The point is the lending institutions have been discriminating in favor of black people for at least 2 generations.
Okay, this man he's not delusional, he's a liar. He's a liar, and he knows the numbers. He knows. You are not, you don't tell the truth, sir. And
Can I ask a question?
I came to this discussion hopefully trying to move a needle so that we could come to some kind of consensus to where we could actually get to nationalist states, but not with people like you, because you didn't trust you. You lie.
You live in a fact-free world.
No, I really don't. You live in a world where you just make things up.
No, I don't.
Where you want to rewrite, where you feel like you're entitled to rewrite history, and you're just not.
Can I make up Waukesha, Minnesota? Tell us, you're going to tell everyone listening that a black man with a history of hating white people did not kill 6 white people in Waukesha, Minnesota. I've made that up.
And let's see, no, but what I will tell you this is that Jeffrey Dahmer killed 11 black people. And
he went to jail, and he was mostly.
And the black guy went to jail too, I'm sure. No, he probably didn't make it because they probably killed him before they probably killed him on the street.
He was a serial killer who also killed white people. I mean,
again, notice folks, how he's dismissing. He says a black man killed 6 people. And then we say, well, this white man killed 11 black people, then it's told that's irrelevant.
No.
So because again,
the point is that a black man with a well-documented history of hating white people drove his car into a crowd of white people within the last 2 months and killed 6 of them and injured 30 of them, and you won't address that.
Okay, and didn't a white person at one of the Black Lives Matter rally, didn't a white person drive a car into the crowd and kill she was white, but didn't he kill one of the protesters? Yeah, that happened. So what's your point, sir? Are you saying that white people are you saying that white people, that for every issue of black people that you feel has committed a crime against white people, we can't find 5 or 10, maybe 20 white people that have committed crimes against black people? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm saying that's.
Yes, okay. So let's see. So I guess Tulsa, Oklahoma didn't happen, did it? 1,800 people killed in 2 days. That didn't happen, did it? Did Tulsa happen or not? Mr. Dickson,
according to the government statistics,
did Tulsa happen or not? Yes or no question?
There's no point in continuing.
Yes or no question?
But you're just living in a dream world.
Oh, I dreamed that white people killed 1,800 black people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1990.
That's a figure that's many times, and that's 103 years ago. We're talking about something that happened 2 months ago, and you won't address it. You will not address it.
Okay, I'm going to say, okay, let me address this for you so that you can stop your whining about me not addressing it. So yes, there was one person out of 48 million black people in this country. One decided that, not all mentally there, decided to drive a car into a parade. But once again, let's talk about the guy at Mandalay Bay. Let's talk about the guy that walked into the gay club in Pulse in Miami and just killed 50 people. White guy.
Carlos, I need to go. This is just an absurdity. This guy is in a.
When you can't win, it's always an absurdity. So yeah, tuck your tail between your legs and go and run again, because that's what you do. Now you've been victimized again. Oh my God, poor white guy hurt. Oh my God, we've been beat up so bad. Oh God.
I would like to make a suggestion. I wish that we could do it this way. How about have 2 minutes on Lloyd and then 2 minutes on Sam? Could we?
Let's start with him because I want to address what he
He's
said.
done most of the talking, and he just spews out questions that he then answers. He doesn't want the answers because he's living in a world of fiction. And that world of fiction is what he
No,
wants.
I'm listening to a liar.
No, you're not.
I'm listening to a liar.
I made up Waukesha. I made that up, eh? Why don't you talk about that? Well, let's look at a couple of facts. I'll take my 2 minutes. The black guy that killed those 6 white people, he's gotten bond. Did the Trump demonstrators get bond in Washington, D.C.?
I believe they did, sir.
The black judge denied them bond. Did the McMichael?
That's not true.
Did the McMichaels down in Brunswick, Georgia, did they get bond after they are accused of killing Ahmaud Arbery? They did not get bond.
No, they couldn't make bond, but go ahead.
The killer in Waukesha, the guy that drove that car, he got bond, and a major leader in the Black Lives Matter movement is raising the bond money. Now, I think that's
Let me see. Let's talk about Kyle Rittenhouse. What did he get? Did Kyle Rittenhouse get bond? Oh yeah, let's see. Did the white nationalists, communitarians, did they raise $2 million for him in 3 weeks? I think so. Or maybe that's another fact that I just made up.
Can I ask a question about that? Did Kyle Rittenhouse shoot a black person or was it a white person?
He shot a white person at a Black Lives Matter rally. And does it really matter? Does it really matter?
If it does,
Does it really matter?
For you and Sam, I'm going to insist on this. I mean, if we can't let each other finish, there's no point in even attempting a dialogue. So 2 minutes.
I was answering Sean's question. Sorry. Go ahead. Sean asked a question. I just answered it.
Sean, you're subject to the 2 minute rule too. I'm not even going to try to get 2 minutes in on this one. So let's see, whose turn is it right now? I feel like you've interrupted Sam several times. I'd like him to make a 2 minute statement and then pass it on to you. 2 minutes, okay?
Sure.
Well, what we see is a massively biased media pandering to black hatred. And not all blacks, I've known lots of successful blacks. Somehow slavery didn't prevent them from being successful people. And so I've known lots of them that are successful, and they became successful the way most of us do, by getting a job, keeping a job, and living off 90% of their income. But this business about George Floyd, this is an incident. It's a picture of one white cop with his knee on one black man's neck out of a nation of 335 million people. Not long ago, a mother, a white woman, so let's just set the race out of this equation, this story. A white mother drowned her children in a bathtub in South Carolina. That's an incident. It doesn't tell us anything about mothers drowning their children. But if this had been treated the way the media treated the George Floyd incident, we would have been told about the pandemic of mothers drowning their children in the bathtub. There is no statistical basis to support the claim that white cops are willy-nilly shooting black people, especially black males, around America. The statistics are quite opposite. There are many more cops who are killed by blacks than blacks are killed by cops. And it's just pandering, those kind of demagogic stuff. It's like a mob in the 1920s accusing a black person of raping a white woman and lynching. It's that kind of rumor mongering, fact contrary, fact free thinking that is going on here. And I see no point in continuing the conversation. I think we should simply terminate and go on about our lives. I want separation from black people. I want my own community. I want black people to have their own community. What is all that? If it takes giving them reparations to get them to create their own community and give us our community, I'm happy to give the reparations, but it has to be a permanent divorce. It needs to be a permanent divorce.
Lloyd, I think you have the floor.
Oh, I think we've been quite successful this evening. If he's willing to jump on the reparation bandwagon, that's all I wanted. Like I said, he started from the premise that I or black people in general want to be around him. I don't. And what irritates me, and I think, well, what frustrates many Black people when we have this conversation is that he can say something like this, George Floyd was an incident, but was Philando Castillo an incident? Was Freddie Gray an incident? Was the men in New York an incident? Was and we could go on and on. Were the people that when back in the 40s when Billie Holiday wrote "Strange Fruit," the song "Strange Fruit"? Were those people hanging from those trees? Because she wrote the song after seeing a Black man hanging from a tree. Was that an incident? Let me see. The 1,800 people that died at Tulsa, Oklahoma, was that an incident? Notice that when we talk about what white people have done, and I'm really frustrated with myself for letting Mr. Dickson take me to white people, because my issue is not with white people, it is with the United States government. And that's what I believe that created the platform for all of this to happen. But what Mr. Dickson wants to do is to say that when we do something, white people are have a reason for it, are justified in, because this white woman putting her children under or drowning her children is an incident. Well, you know what, sir? No, it's not an isolated incident. Have you heard of a little thing called postpartum depression? Probably not. So that happens regularly. A lot of mothers kill their children because of postpartum depression, but you didn't bring that up. So I don't like to have discussions with people that put things in terms that they know are not honest. And he is intellectually dishonest, and he knows it.
Sean, you wanted to ask a question, and you ask it quickly.
Do you, Lloyd, think that most Black people, or even a significant number of the American Black population, the United States, would even support a separation? And Sam, do you think white people would, and what would that look like? I mean, would it even be, would most white people, most Black people even be willing to and allow the discussion to take place in, let's say, an upcoming congressional debate to separate the Blacks and separate the whites? Forget about actually accomplishing it, but would most white people and Black people even be willing to let that discussion take place on a stage with, let's say, a couple of candidates running, for Congress or Senate?
Can I jump in here first? I want to answer that. Let me say this. I think that when you have a real conversation, and it's an honest conversation, and you point out the realities of life, then people see, what are we arguing about? I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, in a 4,688 square foot home on a 120 by 80 foot square foot lot. Very nice home, 4 bedrooms, 4.5 baths. So in my neighborhood, we have subdivisions down here of Spring Lake, 200 residents, one white person, one white family, one. So basically, if you go and look at, I don't know where you live, I don't know anything about, but I'm making a point here. But if you go out your front door, look to your right, look to your left, look straight in front of you, how many Black people are living in those 3 houses? Probably not any. Are one? Okay, here we go.
No. I was trying to unmute. All my neighbors are Hispanic.
Okay, they're not Black. And Hispanics can be Black or, according to them, because I don't know what they're doing. There's Afro Latino, there's Euro Latino. We're talking in America, the issue is Black and white. I think something just happened. Oh, thank you, Charles, because I know you're the one that put that up. So not a lot. We already are separated. We're already separated, and no one is out here but some weak-minded white folks that want to create havoc. It creates this madness. We think about it. Do you know any neighborhoods that are fully integrated? Really?
So is the answer is no, then you don't think
No,
that?
I'm saying once you point that out to people, people go, oh, you're right, and they move on. Sure, I can live with that. I don't know what it would look like in terms of like, I brought this up last week. Could we go to Disneyland, or could we go to Disney World, or could I go visit New York, Broadway, those kinds of things, or just no? I don't know what Mr. Dickson's ethno states look like.
So you would not support separating the blacks and the whites into two separate countries?
Oh, I have no problem with that. Oh no, not two separate. We're one America. We've already had that battle. It was a civil war. The country decided we're one country. I guess that didn't happen either, did it, Mr. Dickson? The Civil War. Go ahead.
I'm not going to engage in any kind of this kind of silliness with you about whether or not I believe the Civil War happened. I will say that I'm looking at the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, which is something, of course, I deplore. But I see the Encyclopedia Britannica says there were 300 people killed. That's 300 too many, but you've multiplied by 6 as the victimology grows and grows and grows, and you magnify things and exaggerate them so as to express what I think is a fair thing, your hatred of white people. You talk about lynching. I don't have a hatred for white people. The first project of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People that was created was the lynching project. And they kept data of how many lynchings there were. And as I said, one is one too many. But their figures back in the teens and 20s is 11, 17, 15. They seem they must have been a collection of Uncle Tom's and Aunt Thomasina's, because they didn't find all these fabulous figures you've got, even back then when things were much worse for Black people than they are now. And there were 35,000 former slaves who were interviewed and gave their testimony in the slave narratives. Overwhelmingly, they described their masters as being pretty fair and just. There was 35,000 Aunt Thomasina's that didn't know what Mr. Kelly knows. 85 years later, you know things that the people who actually suffered slavery did not know. So this is just a retroactive effort to blame us for what happened generations ago and to expand that by a factor of 6 in the Tulsa thing. And then God knows what the factors are in terms of the 35,000 Blacks who didn't give these terrible stories that you want in the slave narratives. I've mentioned facts, not concocted victimhood, let's get even propaganda by a racial and political movement. I just want to separate for you. We can solve all of this. We'll give you your own country. We'll give you money to set the other country up. I'm happy to do that, but I just want my own country.
Well, then I suggest you move to Europe because they have their own country. Because let me say something to you, sir. I was born in Jefferson City, Missouri. That means this country belongs to me as much as it does to you. So while I'm open to living in 2 separate areas, you have yours, we have ours, there's only one America, and there will only always be one America. You tried it back in 1860 to 1865, or 1863, 1865, and you tried it January 6, 2020. We only have one America. One. So again, you can have your part. That's fine.
Here because you're sort of entering into a legal field that I do know something about. I don't think it's quite fair to compare a future scenario of voluntarily dividing the country from what happened in either 1861, definitely not January 6th, 2021. You keep saying 2020. But the truth is that if the country were to be divided, there's really no comparison to secession at all, because obviously if anything like this ever happens, it will be top down. It's not going to be bottom up. It's going to be top down. And I mean, they're talking about in California wants to secede. Hawaii has an excellent reason to secede because Hawaii was illegally annexed. And I think that if it were to be tried in the world court, if Hawaii applied for an exit permit from the United States, it would be granted summarily. because Hawaii was annexed illegally in 1898. It was a free and independent country that was recognized by every civilized nation in the world. And so breaking up the United States is not necessarily to be compared in every case to the so-called Civil War of 1861 to 60.
Well, but it was based on states trying to secede from the Union.
Okay, but I'm just saying that is a bottom-up solution, and if the country were to be divided along racial lines or any other lines, California wanting to leave the Union, it would be a top-down decision. It will never happen due to unilateral secession. So let's not confuse that, and don't try to establish that as a precedent. Now, Sean wanted to ask a question, and Lynette has been incredibly quiet, and she wanted to ask a question or make a comment. So I actually am going to say ladies first. Lynette, I'd like you to say what was on your mind, and then Sean, and then cede back to Sam. Lynette, if you're not going to speak.
She's on mute, Charles.
Yeah, sorry, my teenagers, I had to shush teenagers. Sorry about that. This has been definitely an interesting conversation. I'm learning quite a bit. Thank you, Lloyd and Sam, but what's interesting to me was the summer of 2020 was a crazy time. Lots of arrests. I was actually arrested in that summer. And
did it have anything to do with racial conflict then?
I mean, I'm not really sure. I've got to do some sleuthing. I've got some sleuthing I've got to do. So if anyone knows any good sleuths.
I think Sam Dickson is an attorney in the state where you were arrested, so you could actually talk to Sam Dickson. I don't know.
In Georgia?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, in Georgia.
Yes, you have Sam Dickson. He is one of the top lawyers in Georgia.
I'm not one of the top lawyers in Georgia. Very ordinary.
Is there such a thing as an incrimination clause? An incrimination clause.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that would mean. There's such a thing as police entrapment. I think we're seeing a lot of entrapment.
An incrimination clause, like someone says something to incriminate another person.
I mean, perjury, that happens all the time. It's shocking that the perjury laws might as well be like the blue laws. They're never enforced. I've seen perjury all my life in the courts, and I've never seen it punished.
It was punished here in New Orleans.
Perjury is different, though, than incrimination.
In perjury, you've got people perjuring themselves for one side or the other. You can have police officers perjuring themselves. I've seen that. I'm not so naive as not to have seen that. I've seen people perjuring themselves to try to put the blame on somebody else for something they were involved in.
Oh my God, are you crying?
Happens all the time.
All right. Well, I would definitely like to get an email if possible. Could we email each other to talk more about this?
You can go online and check the State Bar of Georgia member directory.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
Sean,
Thank you, Mr. Dickson.
All right. Thank you.
Sean, you had a question.
Yeah, my question is, why is it that the Black community would not want the white community to separate from the society? I just don't understand that, because the Black, I hear a lot of the Black community wants to be paid reparations, and the Black community has no patience for the white community, but then also not all Black people speak up. I mean, and not all white people speak up. So none of us here, I guess, really could say we speak for all white people or all Black people, right? Because we're a very small sampling of it, So, 1 over n, where n is a very large number. How many other people don't agree with what we have to say and don't, have anything to say. But for the people who do speak up, like, it sounds to me like, Lloyd, you would like a separation from white people, but then you don't want white people. You would not want white people to leave the American society. I'm trying to figure that out. Like
Okay,
sometimes.
so let me explain it this way. I want the same thing that white people want, our majority of white people want. So when we're talking about vaccines, the COVID vaccine, most people understand the science of it, but that's not the issue. The issue is my right to my body, my right, take it, don't take it, my choice. So it's the same thing here. I don't want to live next to you. I'm okay saying that. Oh, here's the thing that Americans do. Americans are socialized to believe that we, and I'll say the words liberal media, says we all have to like each other and we should all kumbaya and get along. I don't have to like you. You don't have to like me. And neither one of us owes each other an explanation as to why we don't like each other. Just respect the fact that I don't like you and leave me alone. We'll be fine. So what I'm saying is, I don't want to live next to you. I want the right to be able to live where I choose and can afford to. Just like I believe there's no one on this panel that would disagree that's what they want.
Okay, but how does this play into today's circumstance? Because recently I just told you that our community has become almost all Hispanic. Now, my neighborhood was traditionally settled by white people and was all white, but now it's filling in with Hispanic people, and there are some blacks too, but it's not an expensive community to live in, which is probably why people are moving in. And I can't afford to go live in like a nice white community with cul-de-sacs and what most people think of as the upper middle class. I'm not there, and I won't be there economically, for the remainder of my life. So I guess I'm trying to understand how what you're saying would work, because if we're not, how could you possibly achieve that? Because it's, in my case, you have non-whites moving into the white neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? So doesn't that fly in the face of what you just said, where you would not, you're not physically moving here, but what about all other non-white people? You say it as if you speak for all non-white people would not want to live next to me, yet all my neighbors are non-white, and I would imagine that no white people are going to move into my neighborhood. It's always going to be non-white people moving in. So do you see? I see.
Probably because, but here's the funny part, Sean. In order for those non-whites to move in, the whites had to move out. So I'm sure that you said historically it was predominantly white, and then it began to change. So you're the one that's behind the times, because those white people that moved out of the neighborhood that started to change probably moved to another white neighborhood, a more expensive one, more exclusive one. So of course, and that's how different neighborhoods change, or how a black neighborhood gets created. Because remember, for many years in many locales in this country, black people were regulated to sections of town that were bounded by cross this after 6 o'clock and see if you make it home. So, and as that started to change, we move in, but then white people move out, we take over the community.
Okay, well, see, now you're getting to what I'm saying. I mean, you don't want white people moving into your community and taking it over, but you want non-white people to be empowered to move into a white neighborhood and take it over as theirs.
No, I didn't say that. That's not what I said. What I said was,
it came off that way.
So first of all, I don't see I said this, I don't see myself as black or white. I see myself as Lloyd. And I see everybody as, I see you as Sean, Charles as Charles, even Mr. Dickson as Mr. Dickson. I see that. I want you to be able to move wherever you choose to.
Except your neighborhood.
No, I didn't say that. I said we have a white person that lives in our neighborhood, a white family, and we all get along fine. The problem is when someone says that you shouldn't be allowed to. See, I think that naturally it's human nature to want to be around people that you relate to, that look like you, that you identify with. See, I don't think that you want to live, you just said it, you said it. You want to live in a white neighborhood. If you could afford to, you'd move to one. You just said that.
No, I didn't. I did not. I did not say
Yeah,
that.
you did.
No, I
Okay.
didn't. You inferred that I said that. I did not say that.
You said if you could move.
No, I didn't. I said
Okay.
I said
I'm not going to say what you said. Okay, I'm not going to argue with you on that. I mean, you tell me what you said.
I said I will probably never be able to afford to do that. I didn't say I would do it if I could afford to do it. Okay.
Okay. All right. My bad. My bad. I hear you.
And I feel pushed by that trend. There's this expectation that white people are supposed to move away and to move to like another white neighborhood. And that there's that expectation. Like I'm supposed to make enough money so I can move away and give up my heritage because there's a whole bunch of immigration pouring across the border. And a lot of that pressure comes from the white leadership in the government because they have some sort of economic model where this is what they view as their engine for economic growth. Somehow letting the immigrants pour into what were traditionally white neighborhoods is going to spur economic growth. I don't see how it's going to, but I don't see how it's not going to. I think it's maybe not related in any way, but I feel, and I think very accurately, that my whole community has been taken over by particularly the Hispanic community and the people who fancy themselves as the Hispanic leaders, not elected, just people who go out and say they're the leaders of the Hispanic community, brag all the time in the media about how the Hispanics are taking over the community and how it is theirs now. And it seems to me that you're concerned about, white people moving into black neighborhoods. You gave the example of urban renewal and white people taking over a black community and saying this is the way it has to be. And I feel as a white person, it's Hispanic people are taking over the community and Hispanic leadership saying, okay, we're the new sheriffs in town. And this is the way it's going to be. And there is no law on the books that protects me as a white person from being, steamrolled over by the Hispanic community just because they flash the Hispanic card, as if somehow that gives them some sort of carte blanche authority to take over politically and change everything. So I'm experiencing
Sean,
a lot of what you say black communities are experiencing.
Sean, let me say
no
this.
Protection.
We have the same issue.
I agree.
Illegal immigration to this country has been steamrolled over everybody. Go to South Central Los Angeles. Go to certain sections of Chicago where Hispanics, if you drive down the street in what 10 years ago was a black neighborhood and has been taken over by Hispanics, they will yank you out of your car and beat you. It has happened to people that I know of in Chicago. Okay, they shoot you. They were in Compton. I think it was Compton, Watts. It was either Compton or Watts. Hispanics are burning black people out of their homes because they want them out of the neighborhood. So I understand you, but do not conflate the black people with immigrants. We are not immigrants. We are citizens of this country, full citizens. And go ahead. I don't know if you want to say something, but let's not conflate those two.
Okay, so would the black community support some sort of race-based legislation as a tool for controlling this mass influx of immigration?
How about we go with what Don said, Fuhrer Don said, send them all home. Just let's not do it in an inhumane way. If you're here illegally, keyword is illegally, you go home. Period.
Okay, how would we implement it?
Well, I don't remember what year it was, and I'm sure Mr. Dickson knows, but it was like 1938, 39. They sent a bunch of Hispanics back home they just put them on trains and said, you got to go. I mean, it was a mass exodus.
If we were to have that type of if we were to achieve some sort of mass exodus like that in today's world, let's say over the course of the next 20 years, would that mass exodus relieve a great deal of the racial tensions that we're experiencing today?
I don't think that I think the world I live in and the America I live in is pretty much black, white, Native American. Everybody else, okay. No. So I think it would in a lot of ways go far, because look at what our current president just did 2 weeks before the election, the 2020 election. He announced that he wanted to give $450,000 per individual to every family member that was separated at the border when they were here illegally. And this president will not say the words reparations for descendants of freedmen. So you and I have a lot in common when it comes to how we feel about people that are here illegally.
Is the quantity, just the sheer number of people who are here illegally, creating such a drain on the system that it's fueling racial strife between blacks and whites, just because there's not enough resource left?
Okay, now I know what the other side says. They say, no, that's not true. But if common sense tells me absolutely. So if we're spending $11,000 per student in our schools, that's just a random number, or let's say 10, and we have a black person, two white people, and a Hispanic, that's $10,000 that we could split, $3,333 per student that we could give to the citizen, the person that was born here. I don't mind help. I believe in foreign aid, but you send them a check, not a plane ticket. They need to go home.
Sam, you've got to come back. You've been very quiet there.
I've been listening. I'm in agreement with both Sean and Mr. Kelly. I find it remarkable that on one point, I find it remarkable that Americans are so blind that they can't see the obvious in front of them. A great hullabaloo was raised about the children of illegal aliens being separated from their parents. I don't do much criminal law. I've done some, but I'm familiar with the criminal system, and it's routine, and it's always been part of American history, that if you commit a crime and you go to jail, your children don't go with you. American citizens go to jail all the time and are separated from their children, and this has gone on for centuries. But suddenly, these illegal aliens are to enjoy greater rights than we are. That said, I do want to leave this discussion. We've been going on for over an hour, and I think that it's limited utility. I wanted to say something about the city I live in, Atlanta. I live in a city that is 47% Caucasian. The city employment is almost 90% African American. In the water department, the city employment is 100% African American. There's not a single white person, not a single Hispanic person who works in our water department. I live in a neighborhood that pays 50% of all the money that goes to the city of Atlanta. And yet and it's an overwhelmingly white neighborhood. And we don't have jobs in the water department. I live in a neighborhood that was invaded by mobs, primarily made up of Black people with some Antifa whites, no white supremacists, who invaded this neighborhood night after night after night to loot and pillage and burn buildings. The Republican governor, Governor Kemp, and the mayor, Keisha Bottoms, issued orders that there were to be no arrests made. Despite those orders, there were 33 people who were arrested despite the instructions to let the criminals go free. The district attorney's office has dropped charges against all 33 in what they said were the interests of higher justice. This does not sound to me like I'm living in a city full of white privilege. It sounds to me like I'm living in a neighborhood, in a city with a great deal of Black privilege. And since I'm leaving, I did want to answer something. I wanted to tell Mr. Kelly something. I don't hate you. Years ago, a Jewish-owned newspaper in Atlanta did a report on me, and they were just convinced that they would be able to find lots of Jews and Blacks who would tell the tale of how awful I had been to them. And I got calls for some months from Blacks and Jews that I knew saying they were being called by this newspaper, asking them, lawyers I had litigated with, judges I had been before, and they were very disappointed because they couldn't find a single Black person who would say that I had been anything other than fair and even kind to them. In the course of my legal career, I have represented hundreds of Black people, many of them free. My largest charitable donation is a matter of public record. As a lukewarm Christian, I do believe we're not supposed to talk about acts of charity, but it's a matter of public record in the deed records of Fulton County, Georgia. My largest charitable donation was a $200,000 donation to the Big Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. And I have represented a Black church in its zoning dispute free of charge. These are not the actions, Mr. Kelly, of somebody who hates Black people, but neither am I willing to go to the back of the bus and see my race sent to the back of the bus, as I think really most Black people now want us to do. So having said that, I think I will say good night and best wishes to you all.
Before you leave, could I just point something out? In this entire conversation, I've never accused you of hating white people. I mean, Black people. I've never accused you. I started the conversation saying I believe that we have a lot more in common than we are apart. So all those things are great. Like I said, my position, Sean has asked 100 questions on how will this work? And I've tried to answer him. You keep saying you just want to have it. So I'm sitting here saying we're in agreement.
Okay.
We're in agreement. You can have your piece over here. The only thing we have to work out is we're going to be one country, one America. I'm not going to be afraid to go into any place that with public streets. I'm not going to do that. I'm not coming to your house. I'm not trying to marry your daughter. I'm not trying, none of that. You have a great life and so will I. And when we need to come together, much like divorced people do when they have children, they co-parent. So we'll co-parent the country, and you stay over there and I'll stay over here, and we'll get along just fine. I just believe that in order to make it work, we are owed reparations for 400 years of unpaid labor and oppression. I want that, and we're good to go.
I don't believe you've had 400 years of unpayment. And I note that you do live in a $4,600 square feet house on a big stretch of land, which seems you've been pretty successful in life. And I imagine you got a loan to get it. But we can park on good terms. I believe we always need to talk. I believe in talking. I think America should talk with Iran. America should talk with Russia. I don't believe that anything is gained by not talking to each other. And as for dividing America, I'm perfectly happy to divide America. I refuse to accept the idea that I'm going to be compelled forever to live in an inseparable country. I think we'd be better off. We're united we fall, divided we stand. So anyway, on those terms, we will say good night and God bless you and best wishes to all.
Thank you, Sam Dickson. Appreciate your participation tonight, and I look forward to, calmer discussions in the future. But now, Sean and Lynette, or Lloyd.
Yes, it was nice to meet you, Mr. Dickson. And I think he already left.
He's gone.
He's gone. And he's gone.
I just have to say that much of that was very, very intellectually dishonest, and he knows it. Out of context, all of that. And I don't think that it moves. I don't think it moves the needle. But I do want to say we were able to ascertain that he's willing to support reparations if he gets his ethno state, which means that reparations, white folks are starting to come on board with reparations. So I think that it was worth having the conversation.
May I ask, does that
I thought
also
it
mean,
was a very interesting conversation. Yes.
does that also mean that Black people are coming along with the idea of having an ethno state?
Black people we live in an ethno state, Sean. We live in an ethno state. Not a lot of Black people live around you. It's Hispanics that moved in and took over. Now, and I think I said this on the last week. I was done with illegal immigrants when I was in California back in the early 2000s, about 2006, 2007, and they were having one of their rallies and took the Mexican flag and put it over the American flag on American soil. Done. Done. Go home. This is going to be the United States of America, not the United States of Mexico. You got to go. If you're not here legally, you got to go.
I think you dodged my question about the ethno state, though. How do we live in an ethno state now? I don't see it.
Well, okay, so once we agree that we want to do it, I think it's, logical. When you decide to bake a cake, the next step is, what kind of cake are we going to bake? So I don't know. Are we going to have borders? At first, I don't think that we can have ethno states. We have one America. Well, I guess ethno states would actually be, like Wisconsin's black and Michigan is white. Okay, that kind of thing. We could have that. No, but we start having the discussions on what that looks like and what are you comfortable with? What am I comfortable with?
What do you think about the idea of having congressional representatives based off of race or some sort of political affiliation rather than geography? Because every election term, the state legislature in Pennsylvania redraws the districting, and they do it to gerrymander. Both sides do it. They've been doing it forever, and they will do it forever. If congressional representation was based off of your affiliation, even if it's up to you, even if, like, let's say if the affiliation is black, it's white, or it's something else, right? And we don't give you a hard time about what you identify as. If I want to identify as black and so I can vote for the black congressperson, even if I'm not black, you can't kick me out. And if you want to identify as white or purple or green or this political group, but what if congressional representation was based off of something other than geography? Would that undermine the effect of gerrymandering political districts, drawing the line straight through the black neighborhood or drawing the line straight through the white neighborhood?
Once again, I'm going to say, I think this is a case of perception is different than the reality.
Okay.
So the congressional districts that we have now are based on race. That's why people are comfortable saying we're going to create another black district, because the districts are drawn so that black and Hispanic district, this is an Asian district. So we're already doing that. We already do it, but because we're socialized to be politically correct all the time, it goes over our heads. Like I said, his ethno state already exists.
So would you support getting rid of the geographic boundaries for congressional districts and just
I think that on some levels, in certain in certain municipalities, they already have, like Chicago, for mayor, you don't run by party, you just throw your hat in the race. So I guess we'd say, okay, the state of Louisiana is entitled to
You understand what Sean is proposing? Sean is proposing a complete restructuring of the ballot.
Right, that's what I was addressing. I was addressing that.
That's not what's happening in Chicago.
No, I said in Chicago, they've been doing that for years. So like in Louisiana, let's say we got 7 congressional seats. So 20 people run and the top 7 become the Congress people. I mean, is that something you're thinking about, Sean?
No, but I think I might, I think that would be a good second, that would be a compromise. I think it would be acceptable. So I was thinking about where, you would survey the population much the way they do now with the census, and you determine how many white people you have living in that state, and how many black people you have living in that state, how many Hispanic people, Asian, etc. And based off of whatever the number is, whatever the number is, you have this many people who are in any one group, you get another congressional representative for every block of that number of people, right? And when a nation started, it was really small. I think it was something like 250 people. Right now, that's way too small. Well, let's say it's 10,000 people, or 100,000 people. So every 100,000 people get a congressperson, or every 200,000 people get a congressperson. So if there's 200,000 white people, then the 200,000 white people get to vote for a congressional representative. If there's 200,000 black people, those 200,000 black people get to vote for a congressional representative, regardless of where you live within the state. So then it wouldn't matter if everybody lives within that particular geographic boundary. But the suggestion that you came up with you know, if you just take the total number of people in the state, and the state would get, as you gave the example of 7 Congress people, then the top 7 would get to be in Congress. I don't know. That might be another way of dealing with the issue. I think that might get rid of
The only
the
problem that we would have with that is white people are always going to be the majority. So they could take all 7 seats because they're the majority.
How did Barack Obama get elected though without the white vote?
System.
Oh no, he did, but see, the question is that should I not be represented in Congress? The presidency is a whole different game. You know, women are saying the next president should be a woman, and whatever it takes to be a woman, because women have been historically not represented in the office of the presidency. But in Congress, the Senate seats, all of that, there should be representation of whatever demographic you belong to. It really should. Because
Okay.
white people, like, we can't have these 2 ethno states and we don't have anybody representing us in Congress, making federal law. Not gonna work. Not gonna work.
So would you support a Congress that wasn't divided by geography, but was instead divided by race? So like one section of the congressional seats were the white people, another section of the congressional seats were the black people, another section of the congressional seats were the Hispanic people, etc.
Sean, that's the way it is now. Black districts, Asian districts, Hispanic districts, white districts. That's the way it is now.
But it's buried under the facade of geography and geographic political boundaries, is it not?
So, well, yeah, they create the districts, sure.
And Sean is proposing, basically, I think that the way it might have to work, I've talked to Sean about this before, you know, the way it would have to work is you would basically have to self-identify, and you would have to register as a black voter or register as a white voter, register as a Hispanic. Currently, the 435 representatives divided into the population, it's roughly 650,000 people for every congressional district. And so basically any group that had less than 650,000 self-identified people would not get any representation. But if you had a list of a nationwide list or a state-by-state list of everyone who self-identified by everything from white to Vietnamese to Hindu, you know, potentially every ethnic group with at least 650,000 self-identified person might get at least 1 seat.
And I would go along with that, but and I think that it would go a long way to stop the, what's the words I'm looking for? To stop knee-jerk reactions. So, you know, all of a sudden, some group is totally underrepresented. Well, at one point, I'm not sure what the number is now, but I'm sure it's very close. Asians represent 6% of the population of this country. They're supposed to have 30 seats in Congress? You know, no. I believe that, you know, if you're 6% of the population, then you get 6% of the seats, and that goes all the way from local offices all the way up through this the Senate and governorships and our state houses up to Congress.
It just occurred to me, you know who would be the big losers in this system?
Who would that be?
the big losers in Sean's system would be the Jews, because the Jews currently have way more than the 5 seats that they'd be entitled to in Congress.
Jews would not get a seat, period.
Why not?
Because Jews are not a race, they're a religion.
Well, I mean,
And they do not identify as Jews, they identify as white. Most of
Do
them.
they? I mean, I don't think that's 100% true. I mean, I've seen a lot of
people the option of identification. Actually, I was giving people the option to identify themselves however they wanted to, and I mean, it is interesting that in the current real world, Jews, whether they're religious or ethnic or whatever you want to call them, they have more representation in Congress than their percentage in population. They have more. They have I think what 1/3 of the Supreme Court, or at least they did at one point. It's an interesting thing, but we've just Sean's proposal would require rethinking the definition of what it means to be American, I think is what's interesting about it.
Well, no, but I'm not going to go along. I'm not going to ever go along with including Jews, our Jewish people, as a demographic when we're talking about race, because Judaism is a religion. It's not a race. And just because a certain group of people happen to have the same religion doesn't mean there's less white people in whatever offices we're talking about, because they're white.
Why do we have people so strongly self-identifying as Islamic and wanting to increase?
Not as a race, as a religion. You identify as Catholic, but a white Catholic.
I actually don't identify as Catholic, but okay, whatever.
Wait a minute, I thought you just told us about Charles, your martyr, and you're on you every year on my birthday, you remind me that it's the Ascension of Mary, and that's a Catholic thing.
It's also an Episcopal thing.
Oh, are you Charles, I swear I thought you were Catholic. You're Episcopalian?
Church of
Okay.
England.
But that's not a race. That's not a race. That's a religion.
Historically, religion has been just as important a source of identity in the United States as race.
But doesn't our Constitution separate religion from government? Don't we go out of our way that the separation of church and state? Didn't we do that?
No, it doesn't. What it says is what the Constitution says is there can be no religious test for office, but it doesn't say that you can't classify people. And I mean, it would make a certain amount of sense to divide white people up into white Catholics, white Baptists.
Why? I don't care what you people do.
Okay,
I really don't care. I really don't care how you. I tell you what. Let's do this. Let's go with the big premise that Black people, which is underrepresented, but let's say that Black people make up 15% of the population of this country. We get 15% of the congressional seats. And I don't know how we deal with the Senate because you only get 2, but let's say 15%, we get 15% of the House seats. How we divide them up or what criteria we use is our business. You guys do your thing. So if you want to do that, you want them to go to Jewish people, or you want them to go to Episcopalian people, or you want them to go to Catholic people, Baptist, evangelical, whatever y'all come up with. If you're going to say women are going to get this many and men are going to get this many, 18 to 49 are going to get this, and 50 to 65 are going to get that. Do that. That's fine.
Do you think you just made an interesting point about the fact that with the Senate you only get 2 per state? Do you think that that would create an adequate balance so because you have 2 senators per state, you still have a geographic representation, and then allow the Congress to change so that it's based off of race? So then,
Well, how about this? Well, I mean, you can fix that. I mean, first of all, let's agree. the way our Senate system works is absolutely insane.
Why?
That- well, because there are 500,000 people in Wyoming or North Dakota, one of them, 500,000, and 13 million in New York City alone. And they both groups get 2 senators.
But isn't,
No.
okay, well, here's an important point though. Don't the senators represent the sovereignty of the state rather than the quantity of the people? Isn't that a representation of the 50 states were 50 sovereign entities in international affairs that agreed to come together with a unified foreign policy?
And when we had 1 million people total in the country spread out pretty much evenly, that made sense. But today we have 350 million. So if you have 20 million people, 15 million people in New York City, 500,000 get to determine how they live their life. That is not fair.
But when the Senate was originally created, the upper house, the upper floor in Philadelphia, was the upper chamber. Was the Senate intended to represent the people, or was the Senate intended to represent the sovereign state?
States.
So
That's
this,
the original intent. The seven,
Sorry, say it again, Charles.
it was the states. It was the constituent parts of the government, the sovereign nations that were granted independence by Britain in the Treaty of Paris, 1783.
And again, I'm sure the founding fathers could not imagine the America that we live in today,
Sure,
where you have urban areas that quite commonly have more people in one city than you have in an entire state. I'm sorry. Let's be fair.
Well,
that was in fact the situation. It was just a much smaller population overall.
okay, but if you have a larger population, you get more representatives in Congress, correct?
In Congress.
Right.
But-
Okay. So
But
is
now,
that
based on what they've done with the Senate, we have 2 people, well, 3, no, actually 2, Sinema and Manchin running the government.
okay? But
Because
again,
they can't.
the two senators from every state were originally appointed by the governor of those states. Right? Because,
Legislature, not the governor.
okay, those 2 senators, they're not there to represent the people of the state. Their mission in the Constitution is to represent the sovereign state itself, because the governor doesn't go to Washington to argue legislation. The state.
In all fairness, we should do a special show on this one issue because
Okay.
this is Jerry O'Neill's biggest issue in the world. Jerry O'Neill is not here tonight. He hates talking about race, so this is not his thing. But he loves talking about the Senate. He loves talking about states, and in particular the 17th Amendment. I actually met Jerry O'Neill 20 odd years ago because of his proposal in the Montana Senate to repeal the 17th Amendment, which would have restored the original configuration of the Senate. So if we're going to discuss this, we should adjourn until another night so we can have Jerry, because Jerry is one of the leading guys.
Charles, can I kick off for just a second? I need to give a shout out to Miss Bess, who was on the call. How you doing, Leslie? She's on the call. Go ahead.
Hi there, Lloyd. How are you?
Oh,
I'm good. I'm good.
this was, and I had no idea. I thought this was Alex. Okay. Who is this?
Oh, that's my cousin.
Oh, hi there. Good to meet you.
Leslie.
Hi, nice to meet you, Charles.
I'm sorry I addressed a letter to you and asked if you were Alex Fedorov or someone even stranger.
Neither, but thank you.
No, but back to this whole Senate issue. If we're going to have 2 different countries, we have to find out how we run the single country. If you're gonna have your side, we're gonna have our side. We have to figure out how we're gonna run the whole thing. And I think that Sean, the answer to your question is to take congressional races and Senate races national, and we get 15% because we're 15% of the population. You get whatever you get. Asians get what they get, and and so on and so forth. And I think that's fair.
Well, my concern though is you're eliminating the sovereignty of the state. You're eviscerating the existence of the state itself. The 50 states would have absolutely no representation in lawmaking because the senators are there to represent the state. They represent the sovereign state because the governor can't go. You know, doing it your way, then both the Senate and the House would essentially perform the same function. They would represent the people, not the sovereign state.
Well, Sean, let me ask you this. If we turned our country, we thought of our country as you know, Fuhrer Don likes to do, as a business.
Okay.
And
Well, I'm talking to Lloyd and Sean about the 17th Amendment and the state. So we got to get you involved in this at some point.
hold on. So if we look at the country as a business, you own 70% of the business and I own 30% of the business. Should I have an equal say in the decisions made in the business, or should it be based on what I own what I bring to the table?
But isn't that the argument that the state has for maintaining its 2 senators as representatives of the state? Because it owns 1/50th of the union, 1 over n times however many states we have. Right now we have 50.
Right.
Okay, so the state is the entity that entered into the union. You and I can't enter into the union.
But I'm
because we were
sorry, okay, but and when we formed when we formed America, it was an experiment. And it's not like we haven't seen things that didn't work in the past. And we have a little thing called the constitutional amendments. So we can change that so that it's fair. It is not fair that 500,000 people can dictate policy to 2 million. No, I'm not saying they shouldn't have a voice, but it should be a weighted vote.
Okay, Lloyd, just so you'll know, there is a clause in the Constitution that says no state shall ever be denied its equal representation in the Senate. So if we
I'm aware of that.
if we ever repeal that, it's the end of the current Constitution. But Sam Dickson was saying he foresees and desires the end of America. And I think on that note, I did just get a call from Jerry O'Neill. He needs me. I've got to go. We're almost at an hour and 45 minutes right now. Lynette left us unceremoniously. We didn't even get to say goodbye to her. And so I think we're going to have to adjourn tonight. But Lloyd, all I can say is sorry about you and Sam sort of getting off to a rocky start, you and Sean. I think this is your first meeting and you all seem to have gotten off to a much better start.
No, Sean was on last week. Sean was here last week.
But you all didn't talk at all.
No, he didn't talk.
I was here for
Lloyd. There's never a day when Lloyd doesn't talk. Okay, just saying.
I was working on something. I was here for technical purposes, getting people's microphones up, but I had something to do last week.
Yeah, like I said, with regard to Mr. Dickson, in good politics, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just issues. And at the end of it, I think we were able to come to see that we agree on a lot more than what we disagree on. So I think tonight was very productive.
I'll just state my hope. My hope is that if we can continue this, and I don't know that, I don't know, I'll have to talk to Sam about it, but he may not be willing to come back because I don't think he felt there was good synergy. Bill has already said he will come back, but there are plenty of other people we can talk to. But my hope is that I don't think you're going to run for Congress this year. It doesn't seem like. Because you haven't said anything about it. But if you do decide to run for Congress again, I hope that eventually, by the time you do, that we'll have a library of these discussions that will contribute to your candidacy and your platform, and that will help you refine your positions.
2 years goes by really quickly, and I'm giving Troy an opportunity to actually do something. So I'm giving him 2022. But if he hasn't put something out for reparations, 2024, his ass is mine. Just saying.
Okay. On that note, good night, Leslie Best. Good to meet you. Good night, Sean Donahue. Glad we had you on. I don't know what the hell happened to Alex. He was supposed to join us. But Lloyd, once again, thank you very much. And
Thank
good.
you. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Okay, we will. We'll do something next weekend.
Thanks. All right, bye-bye.
Oh, and keep the feast of King Charles the Martyr.
Okay.